15 years. No handshakes, no lovers, no mercy. Kang Min-jae could survive a knife to the ribs without flinching, but a single brush of human skin would detonate every nerve in his body, like a grenade going off under his skull, until a black housekeeper with scarred hands touched his face during a power outage and gave him the first moment of peace he'd felt since the day his own family tried to erase his mind. Once upon a time, in the fog-soaked mountains of Northern California, there stood a compound of black steel and bulletproof glass that even other criminals whispered about in back rooms. Inside that fortress lived a man the underworld called Bamsa, the Viper. His real name was Kang Min-jae, heir to the Mugunghwa syndicate, and for 15 years, no one had been able to touch him without consequences that ended in blood. Not a handshake, not a shoulder brush, not even the weight of another person's shadow falling across his skin without triggering something that looked like a seizure and felt like dying from the inside out. Most people assumed he was paranoid, germophobic, insane with power. They saw the custom-made gloves he wore even in August heat, the 3-foot perimeter his guards enforced with violence, the way he conducted billion-dollar negotiations through frosted glass barriers, and they called him untouchable in the way you call a king untouchable. They had no idea how literal it was. The truth was buried 15 years deep, locked in a white room Min-jae still saw every time he closed his eyes. The truth had a name, Kang Dae-jung, his older half-brother, the one who smiled with too many teeth and had always watched Min-jae the way a snake watches a mouse before it strikes. Their father had built the Mugunghwa syndicate from nothing. Immigrant desperation turned into West Coast power, gambling, real estate, shipping containers full of things. Customs agents were paid extremely well not to inspect. He'd always said the empire would go to whichever son proved himself worthy. Dae-jung decided worthiness was something you could steal by breaking your competition so thoroughly they'd never recover. It started with a woman. It always starts with a woman in stories like this. Her name was Sora, and she had a smile that made Min-jae, young and stupid at 24, believe in things like love and loyalty. He didn't know his brother had sent her, didn't know every kiss was surveillance, every whispered secret a weapon handed directly to his enemy. The night it happened, Sora led him to a medical facility on the outskirts of Oakland, one of the syndicate's properties, which should have been his first warning. She said there was evidence of betrayal he needed to see, proof that their father's lieutenants were planning a coup. Min-jae went because he trusted her, because he was still a man who believed people meant what they said. The lights were waiting, surgical, blinding. And Dae-jung was waiting too, standing in the doorway, with his hands in his pockets like he'd just won a game Min-jae hadn't known they were playing. "Father always loved you more," Dae-jung said, his voice pleasant, conversational. "Let's see if he still does when you're too shattered to lead anything." They strapped Min-jae to a chair, medical restraints, the kind designed for people who fight hard, and then Dae-jung introduced him to Dr. Hwang, a neurologist who'd had his medical license revoked for experiments the ethics board had called crimes against human dignity. What came next wasn't torture for information. It was torture for transformation, electroshock, sensory deprivation, neurochemical injections that felt like acid in his veins. They didn't just hurt him, they rewired him, took his mirror neurons, the parts of the brain responsible for empathy and physical resonance, and turned them into landmines. By the time they were finished, Min-jae's nervous system could no longer distinguish between his pain and anyone else's. Every human touch transmitted their physical sensations, their emotional poisons, directly into his body as amplified agony. A handshake felt like his bones were splintering. A hug felt like drowning in broken glass. The medical term was extreme tactile empathy disorder with pain amplification. Min-jae called it hell with a heartbeat. Dae-jung left him in that white room for 4 days, left him screaming himself raw while his brain ate itself alive, trying to process a reality it was never designed to handle. By the time their father's men found him, Min-jae never learned who finally talked. The damage was permanent, irreversible, carved into his neural pathways like names on a tombstone. His father wept. Daejung played the devastated brother perfectly, and Min-jae learned what it meant to be truly, cosmically, alone. But he didn't break. He evolved. Over 15 years, Min-jae became something else entirely. He took his grief and his rage and his ruined nervous system and built an empire that operated through proxies, through technology, through fear so pure people obeyed without ever seeing his face. He never touched his enemies. He didn't have to. His reputation did the killing for him. He moved into this compound in the mountains, all black steel and empty spaces, a fortress designed for a man who needed distance, the way other people needed air. He wore gloves lined with medical-grade synthetic fiber. He kept a 3-foot perimeter enforced by guards who'd die before they let anyone breach it. His staff learned fast: never make eye contact, never enter a room he occupies, and God help you if you ever touch him. The last person who did, a new security contractor who hadn't been briefed, had grabbed Min-jae's shoulder to get his attention. Min-jae had collapsed instantly, every nerve firing at once, blood pouring from his nose as his brain tried to process the man's hangover, his guilty conscience about cheating on his wife, his chronic back pain, all of. It translated into electrical agony that felt like being burned alive from the inside. The contractor had been paid a small fortune to never speak about what happened and escorted off the property within the hour. After that, no one touched Min-jae. No one even tried. People called him a monster. He let them. It was easier than explaining he was just a man whose body had become a prison with walls made of other people. Money couldn't buy him peace. Power couldn't silence the noise. Every single day was a war against proximity, against the phantom echoes of sensation that haunted him even in solitude, against the crushing weight of knowing this was all his life would ever be, until her. 3,000 miles away in a cramped apartment in South Memphis where the AC only worked when it felt like it, there lived a woman named Shayla Brooks who'd learned early that the world didn't owe you gentleness. It only gave you choices about how hard you'd fight back. Shayla's father left when she was 7, and her mother worked 3 jobs and still came up short every month. By 15, Shayla was the one working, cleaning offices after school, babysitting on weekends, doing whatever it took to keep her little sister Imani fed and their lights on. But Shayla wasn't bitter. She was steady, calm. She moved through chaos like water, quiet and persistent and impossible to break. People always said there was something almost eerie about her composure, like pain just slid off her without sticking. They had no idea how literally true that was. Shayla had been born with a condition doctors called congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis, CIPA for short. Her nervous system simply didn't process pain signals the way other people's did. She could break her arm and not realize it until she saw the bone, could burn her hand on a stove and only notice when she smelled cooking flesh. As a child, it had been terrifying for her mother, dangerous, the kind of thing that required constant vigilance because Shayla couldn't feel when her body was damaged. But as an adult, Shayla had learned to navigate it. She paid attention to visual cues, checked herself regularly for injuries, learned to read her body through observation rather than sensation. And she'd learned something else. That being unable to feel pain made other people uncomfortable in ways they couldn't articulate, so she'd gotten very, very good at hiding it. When Imani was shot in a drive-by at 19, wrong place, wrong time, a bullet that left her paralyzed from the waist down, Shayla made a promise. She'd take care of her sister no matter what it cost, no matter what she had to do. So when the hospital bills climbed into 6 figures and her mother's health started failing under the stress, Shayla did what she always did. She found a way forward. The job listing was strange. Private estate attendant, Northern California, live-in position, $180,000 annually, discretion absolutely required, must be comfortable with isolation and strict protocols, no previous experience necessary. Everyone told her not to apply. They said the man who owned that compound was dangerous, a recluse, a criminal, maybe worse. But Shayla had been around dangerous men her whole life, and she'd learned that the most dangerous thing you could do was let fear make your decisions for you. She needed the money, so she applied. 3 weeks later, She was on a plane to San Francisco, her entire life packed into 2 suitcases, heading toward a fortress in the mountains and a man she'd never met. She had no idea she was about to become the only person in 15 years who could touch Kang Min-jae without killing him. She had no idea her life was about to change forever. The compound looked like something designed to keep the world out, or keep something dangerous locked inside. Shayla pressed her face to the car window as the black SUV wound up the mountain road, watching the fortress emerge from the fog like a villain's lair in a movie. All sharp angles and tinted glass, steel beams cutting through mist, security cameras tracking their approach like predatory eyes. The driver hadn't spoken once during the 2-hour trip from the airport. Shayla had tried conversation exactly 1 time. Beautiful area. And gotten silence so profound she'd decided to save her energy. When they finally stopped at the main entrance, a woman in her 60s stood waiting, her posture military straight, her expression carved from disapproval. She wore all black, her gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful, and she studied Shayla the way a jeweler studies a suspicious diamond. "Miss Brooks, I'm Mrs. Lim, the house manager. Follow me. Bring only 1 suitcase for now." Shayla grabbed her larger bag and followed, her sneakers silent on polished concrete floors that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold. Everything looked like it had been designed by someone who valued empty space more than warmth, who saw furniture as a necessary evil rather than comfort. They walked through hallways lined with abstract art that Shayla suspected was worth obscene amounts of money, past rooms with doors that stayed closed, up a staircase made of floating steel platforms that shouldn't have been able to hold weight, but somehow did. Mrs. Lim didn't slow down, didn't offer a tour, just marched forward like a woman on a mission. Finally, she stopped outside a narrow door on the 3rd floor and produced a key. "Your quarters, 6 by 10 feet, private bathroom. You'll take meals in the staff kitchen on the ground floor, east wing. Laundry facilities are shared. You're expected to keep this space immaculate." She pushed the door open. The room was barely bigger than a closet. A single bed, a dresser with 4 drawers, a window that looked out onto the fog-wrapped forest. Clean, functional, utterly impersonal. Shayla had lived in worse. Much worse. "It's fine," she said. Mrs. Lim's eyebrow lifted slightly like she'd expected complaints. "Good. Unpack quickly. I'll brief you on your duties in 20 minutes. Do not explore the compound. Do not touch anything that isn't in your designated areas. And above all," her voice dropped, gaining weight, "you will follow Mr. Kang's protocols without question or deviation. Is that clear? Crystal. 20 minutes, Miss Brooks. The staff kitchen. Don't be late." The door closed and Shayla was alone. She unpacked methodically, hanging her few nice clothes, folding her work uniforms, tucking her medications and first aid kit in the bathroom. The routine was soothing, familiar. When she finished, she checked her phone, 1 bar of signal, just enough for emergencies, and sat on the bed. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable. The silence was absolute. Shayla closed her eyes and let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. She'd left Memphis, left Imani in a good facility, but still left her, left everything familiar for a job working for a man everyone said was dangerous, for money, for her sister's medical bills, for the hope that maybe, finally, they could stop drowning. "It's just a job," she told herself. "You've done harder things. You've survived worse." But something about this place made her skin prickle with awareness, made some ancient prey instinct whisper that she'd just walked into a predator's den. She ignored it. Shayla had learned a long time ago that fear was just information, and information only mattered if you let it control you. 19 minutes later, she walked into the staff kitchen. Mrs. Lim was waiting with a tablet and an expression that suggested she expected Shayla to fail. 2 other staff members sat at a small table in the corner, a middle-aged Korean man who must be the chef based on his whites, and a younger woman, maybe Filipina, who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Neither of them made eye contact with Shayla. "Sit," Mrs. Lim commanded, gesturing to the chair across from her. Shayla sat. You're here because Mr. Kang requires additional domestic support. Your primary responsibilities will be cleaning and maintaining the East Wing living spaces, the library, and Mr. Kang's personal study. You will work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 6 days a week, Sundays off. Mrs. Lim slid the tablet across the table. On the screen was a detailed floor plan of the compound, with certain areas highlighted in green and others marked in red. Green zones are your authorized areas. Red zones are absolutely forbidden. If you enter a red zone for any reason, your employment will be immediately terminated and you will be escorted off the property. No exceptions, no explanations, no severance. Shayla studied the map. The red zones were extensive. Most of the second floor, the entire west wing, something labeled observation deck, and a section of the basement marked only with asterisks. Understood, she said. Good. Now, the most important rules, the ones that will keep you employed and safe. Mrs. Lim leaned forward, her eyes hard and unblinking. Mr. Kang has what you might call an extreme personal space requirement. This is not negotiable, not flexible, and not up for discussion. Shayla waited. You will maintain a minimum distance of 4 feet from Mr. Kang at all times. If he enters a room you're cleaning, you will leave immediately by the nearest exit. You will never approach him unless he specifically summons you. You will never attempt to hand him anything directly. Place it on the nearest surface and step back. You will never, under any circumstances, make physical contact with him. The way Mrs. Lim said that last part made Shayla's instincts flare. This wasn't about germophobia or eccentricity. This was about something else, something that tasted like fear. What happens if someone touches him? Shayla asked quietly. Mrs. Lim's face went carefully blank. It would be extremely unpleasant for everyone involved. The last person who made that mistake is no longer employed here, and Mr. Kang was hospitalized for 18 hours. Hospitalized. The word hung in the air like a threat. I understand, Shayla said, and she did, even if she didn't understand why. One more thing. Mrs. Lim's voice dropped even lower. Mr. Kang values silence. No humming, no singing, no unnecessary noise. Move quietly, work efficiently, and make yourself invisible. The best employees are the ones he never notices. Behind Mrs. Lim, the young woman at the table, her name tag said Rosa, caught Shayla's eye and mouthed a single word, run. Shayla didn't run. She'd never been very good at running. The first 3 days, Shayla never saw him. She woke at 5:30, showered, dressed in the plain black uniform Mrs. Lim had provided, and reported to the staff kitchen for a silent breakfast. By 6, she was working, dusting, vacuuming, polishing surfaces that already gleamed, maintaining a level of perfection that felt almost obsessive. The compound was beautiful in an austere, museum-like way. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto endless forest, furniture that was more art than function. Everything was designed for someone who needed space the way other people needed oxygen. She learned the rhythms of the house. The chef arrived at 7 to prepare meals that were delivered to Mr. Kang's private quarters via a dumbwaiter system. Rosa cleaned the guest suites that apparently never had guests. The groundskeeper maintained the exterior with military precision, and everyone moved like ghosts, silent and separate, never quite connecting. On the 4th day, Shayla was cleaning the library, a massive room lined with books in Korean, English, Japanese, and languages she couldn't identify when she felt it. That pricking awareness, the sensation of being watched. She turned slowly. He stood in the doorway. Kang Min-jae was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, and beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance, black hair styled with precision. He wore all black, tailored pants, a thin sweater, and those gloves Mrs. Lim had mentioned, black and fitted like a second skin. But it was his stillness that struck her. He didn't move like a normal person. He moved like someone who'd learned to control every micro-expression, every unconscious gesture, like his body was a weapon he'd learned to keep sheathed. Shayla immediately stepped back, lowering her gaze the way Mrs. Lim had instructed. Her heart kicked up. Not from fear exactly, but from the sheer intensity of his presence, like standing too close to a high-voltage wire. "You're the new hire," he said. His voice was low, controlled, with just a trace of a Korean accent smoothed by years in America. "Yes, sir. Shayla Brooks." Silence. She could feel him studying her, taking her apart with his eyes. "You don't flinch," he said finally. Shayla kept her gaze on the floor. "Sir? The others flinch when I enter a room. You didn't. You stepped back, but you didn't flinch." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. More silence. Longer this time, heavy with something she couldn't name. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Shayla released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat already slowing to normal, but something had just happened, something that felt significant even though she couldn't articulate why. That night, lying in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, Shayla replayed those 30 seconds over and over. The way he'd looked at her, the word he'd used, interesting. She had a feeling her life had just gotten a lot more complicated. What she didn't know was that 3 floors below, Kang Min-jae stood at his eastern window, staring at nothing, his bare hands pressed against the cold glass. For the first time in 15 years, the noise in his head had quieted when another person entered the room. Just a little, just enough to notice. And he had no idea what to do about it. The storm came on a Tuesday, rolling in from the Pacific with the kind of fury that made the Weather Service issue warnings in all caps. Shayla watched it approach from the library windows while she worked, seeing the sky turn that sick greenish black that always preceded the worst weather. She'd been at the compound for 2 weeks now, and the rhythm of isolation had become almost comfortable. Wake, work, eat alone, sleep, repeat. She'd learned which floorboards creaked, which rooms Min-jae preferred, how to make herself invisible when he passed through, and he'd been passing through more often. Nothing obvious, nothing she could point to as a pattern. But she'd notice him in the library when she came to dust, sitting with a book he didn't seem to be reading. Find him in the hallway outside whatever room she was cleaning, standing at the window like he'd just happened to stop there. Catch glimpses of him watching her through doorways before he turned away. Mrs. Lim had noticed too. The house manager's disapproval had grown sharper, her instructions more clipped. "Mr. Kang has been distracted lately. See that you give him no reason to continue being distracted, Miss Brooks." Shayla had nodded and kept working, but privately she wondered what she was supposed to do differently. She followed every rule, maintained distance, stayed silent, made herself invisible. If Min-jae was distracted, it wasn't because of anything she was doing wrong. The first crack of thunder came just after 8 p.m., so loud it rattled the windows in their frames. Shayla was in her room, video calling Imani, watching her sister's face on the small phone screen. "Girl, that sounds scary as hell," Imani said, her eyes wide. "You sure you're safe up there in that creepy rich man's castle? It's not creepy, it's just quiet. That's what makes it creepy. Too quiet. And you still haven't seen him do anything normal? Like eat cereal or watch TV or pick his nose?" Shayla laughed despite herself. "I'm not spying on him, Mani. I'm just cleaning." "A man who won't let nobody touch him? That's not normal, Shay. That's trauma. Big trauma." Imani's expression softened. "Just be careful, okay? I know you don't feel pain like regular people, but that doesn't mean you can't get hurt." "I'm always careful. How are you feeling? Physical therapy going okay?" They talked for another 20 minutes, Imani complaining about her therapist, updating Shayla on their mother's improving health now that the medical bills were actually getting paid. By the time they hung up, the storm had grown into something biblical, wind screaming against the building, rain hammering the windows like it was trying to break through. Then the lights went out. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. Shayla sat frozen for a moment, letting her eyes adjust, but there was nothing to adjust to. No ambient light, no glow from electronics. The compound's backup generators should have kicked in immediately. They hadn't. Shayla grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to navigate to her door. The hallway was pitch black, the emergency lights apparently on the same dead circuit. She could hear things in the darkness, wind, rain, and something else. Something that sounded almost like a scream, low, guttural, inhuman. Shayla's body moved before her brain finished processing. She ran toward the sound, her phone's light cutting a narrow path through the blackness, her sneakers silent on the floor. Down the main staircase, through the corridor toward the east wing, following the horrible noise that was getting louder, more desperate. She found him on the floor outside his private quarters. Min-jae was convulsing, his body rigid, his hands clawing at his chest like he was trying to tear something out. His eyes were open but unseeing, blood streaming from his nose, his mouth twisted in agony. The gloves were off, lying a few feet away, and his bare hands were shaking so violently they blurred. "Mr. Kang!" Shayla dropped beside him, her phone clattering away, the light spinning shadows across the walls. He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear her. His whole body was locked in a full seizure, every muscle contracted, his breathing coming in short, sharp gasps that sounded like drowning. Shayla had seen seizures before. Imani had them sometimes after the shooting, but this was different. This looked like torture, like every nerve in his body was firing at once, like he was being electrocuted from the inside. The storm, the sensory overload. Whatever condition he had, the thunder and lightning must have triggered something catastrophic in his nervous system. She grabbed his wrists, trying to stop him from hurting himself. His skin was ice cold and slick with sweat, and the moment she touched him, his eyes found hers. For a split second, there was recognition, terror, and then his body convulsed harder. "Listen to me," Shayla said, her voice cutting through his gasps. "You need to breathe. Just breathe." He couldn't. His airway was constricting, his lips turning blue. He was choking on his own tongue. Shayla didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed his face with both hands, her palms against his cheeks, her fingers pressing firmly against his temples. "Look at me. Look at me right now." Min-jae's eyes locked onto hers, and something impossible happened. The convulsions slowed, his breathing evened out. The rigid tension in his body began to unwind like a fist slowly opening. His eyes widened, not with pain now, but with shock, with disbelief. Shayla kept her hands on his face, feeling his pulse racing beneath her fingertips. "That's it. Just breathe. In and out. You're okay." "How?" His voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. "How are you?" "Shh, don't talk. Just breathe." But he was staring at her like she'd just performed a miracle, like she'd violated the laws of physics. His hands came up slowly, trembling and wrapped around her wrists, not pulling her away, holding her there. "You're touching me," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "You're touching me and it doesn't hurt." Shayla's breath caught. She looked down at where his bare hands circled her wrists, his fingers pressing against her pulse points, and understood. This man hadn't been touched by another human being in 15 years without experiencing agony. Until now. Until her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Neither do I." His grip tightened, like he was afraid she'd disappear. "Everyone hurts me. Every touch feels like knives, like acid, like I'm being burned alive, but you—" He swallowed hard. "You feel like silence." The storm raged outside, but inside that dark hallway there was only the sound of their breathing and the feeling of skin on skin, something so simple, so ordinary, and for him, apparently, miraculous. "What happened to you?" Shayla asked softly. Min-jae's eyes closed, his jaw tightening. "That's a long story." "I've got time." He laughed, a broken sound. He stopped, started again. 15 years ago, my brother did something to me, something that rewired my nervous system. Now I feel other people's pain when they touch me. Their physical pain, their emotional pain, all of it, amplified into agony. It's called extreme tactile empathy disorder. There's no cure." Shayla's chest tightened. She thought about her own condition, about being unable to feel pain, about how isolated that had made her. How much more isolated must he be? Feeling too much instead of nothing. "I'm sorry," she said. His eyes snapped open, searching her face. "You mean that?" "Of course I do. Most people don't. Most people think I'm paranoid or cruel or insane. They think the distance is about power." His voice dropped. "It's about survival." Shayla understood survival. She'd built her entire life around it. Slowly, carefully, she moved one hand from his face to his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it pounding fast and hard. "Does this hurt?" "No." The word came out wondering, reverent. "It feels like peace. Like I can finally breathe." They stayed like that for a long moment, Shayla kneeling on the floor with her hand over his heart, Min-jae staring at her like she was something holy and impossible. Then the generators kicked in, flooding the hallway with light. Min-jae flinched, his eyes adjusting, and Shayla saw him fully for the first time. Blood on his face, his shirt soaked with sweat, his expression raw and unguarded and devastatingly vulnerable. "I should get Mrs. Lim," Shayla said. "Get you help?" "No." His hand covered hers, pressing it firmly against his chest. "Don't go, please." It wasn't a command. It was a plea, desperate and naked. "Okay," Shayla whispered. "I'll stay." She helped him sit up, then stand, his arm heavy across her shoulders. He leaned on her more than he probably wanted to admit, and she guided him into his quarters, a space she'd never been allowed to enter. All dark colors and expensive emptiness. He collapsed onto the bed, and Shayla sat beside him, her hand still in his. "Why doesn't it hurt?" he asked again, staring at their joined hands like they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Why you?" "I don't know," Shayla admitted. "But maybe—" She hesitated, then decided to trust him with the truth. "I have a condition, too, CIPA, congenital insensitivity to pain. I can't feel physical pain, never could." Min-jae's eyes widened. "You can't feel pain." "No. And I feel everyone else's pain amplified." He looked at her, something like wonder dawning in his expression. "We're opposites." "Perfect opposites," Shayla agreed. He lifted her hand to his face, pressing her palm against his cheek, his eyes closing like she was something precious. "I haven't felt another person's skin in 15 years without wanting to die. Do you understand what you've just given me?" Shayla's throat tightened. Hope? Everything. The storm continued outside, but inside that room, with her hand against his face and his fingers wrapped around her wrist, something fundamental had shifted between them. Neither of them knew it yet, but they'd just become each other's salvation and each other's greatest vulnerability. Dawn came slowly, bleeding gray light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Shayla woke to find herself still sitting on the edge of Min-jae's bed, her hand resting on his chest, his fingers loosely curled around her wrist, even in sleep. She'd stayed all night, watching him breathe, making sure the seizures didn't return, and if she was honest with herself, marveling at the simple fact of touch, something she'd never valued because she'd never understood how precious it could be until she met a man who'd been starving for it for 15 years. His face in sleep was different, younger. The harsh lines of control smoothed away, leaving something almost peaceful. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way his dark eyelashes cast shadows on his cheekbones, and felt something shift in her own chest, something dangerous and tender and completely inappropriate for an employee to feel about her employer. She should move, should leave before he woke up, before this became even more complicated than it already was. But she didn't want to let go. The door opened without warning. Mrs. Lim stood in the doorway, her face cycling through shock, fury, and something that might have been fear in the span of 2 seconds. Her eyes landed on Shayla's hand pressed against Min-jae's chest, on his fingers wrapped around her wrist, on the intimacy of their position. "Miss Brooks," Mrs. Lim's voice was ice, "step away from Mr. Kang immediately." Min-jae's eyes snapped open. For a moment, disorientation flickered across his face, then memory returned. His grip on Shayla's wrist tightened protectively. "Mrs. Lim." His voice was rough with sleep but carried absolute authority. "Leave us." "Sir, I must insist." "I said leave." The command was quiet, but it landed like a slap. Mrs. Lim's mouth thinned into a hard line. "Mr. Kang wishes to see you in his office at 9 o'clock, Miss Brooks. Sharp." She turned on her heel and left, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt like a threat. Silence filled the room. Shayla carefully extracted her hand from Min-jae's grip, immediately feeling the loss of warmth. "I should go. Get cleaned up before I fire you?" Min Jae sat up, running his free hand through his disheveled hair. Is that what you think is going to happen? I broke about 15 rules last night, entered your private quarters, touched you, stayed the night. Shayla met his eyes. Mrs. Lim looked like she wanted to have me arrested. Mrs. Lim doesn't make those decisions. I do. He swung his legs off the bed, standing in one fluid motion. Even rumpled and exhausted, he moved with that predatory grace that made him seem dangerous. And I'm not firing you. Then what happens at 9 o'clock? Min Jae walked to the eastern window, staring out at the fog-wrapped forest. His shoulders were tense, his posture rigid. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Last night was impossible. You understand that, right? What happened between us shouldn't be possible. I know. For 15 years, every human touch has felt like torture. Physical agony so intense I've collapsed, bled, blacked out. I've had doctors, specialists, neurologists. No one's been able to fix it. No one's been able to even dull it. He turned to face her. And then you touched me, and I felt nothing. Not pain, not corruption, just silence. The way he said that word, silence, made it sound sacred. I don't understand why it works, Shayla said quietly, but I'm glad it does. So am I, which is why I need you to stay close. He crossed the room slowly, stopping the prescribed 4 feet away from her out of habit. I need to know if this was a fluke or something repeatable, if it only works during seizures or if it's constant, if... He stopped, his jaw working. I need you near me, Shayla, and I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to make that happen. Something about the way he said it made her heart clench. This wasn't about money. This was about a drowning man who'd just found oxygen. What are you offering? She asked. A promotion. Personal attendant. You'll accompany me throughout the day. Meetings, meals, work sessions. Your presence seems to dampen the effect even when we're not touching. When you're in the room, the background noise quiets. I can think. I can breathe. His hands flexed at his sides. The salary would be triple your current rate, $540,000 annually. Shayla's breath caught. That was life-changing money. Imani's medical bills paid, her mother's retirement secured, everything she'd been fighting for handed to her. But she wasn't stupid. She knew what she'd be becoming. Not an employee, but a crutch. A human pharmaceutical. And she knew from the heat in Min Jae's eyes last night that this was already more complicated than a professional arrangement. And if I say no, she asked, testing, then you leave with 3 months severance and an NDA. His voice was flat. But you won't say no. You sound very certain. You came here for your sister, for money to pay medical bills you can't afford. I'm offering you enough money to change your family's life. He stepped closer, breaking his own 4-foot rule, closing the distance to 2 feet. And if I'm being honest, I think you're curious about this, about what we might be able to do together. He was right. She was curious. Curious about why her touch didn't hurt him. Curious about the way her heart raced when he looked at her. Curious about what it would mean to be close to a man this dangerous, this broken, this desperately in need of something only she could give. When do I start? She asked. Something that might have been relief flickered across his face. Immediately. Mrs. Lim will brief you on the new protocols, but Shayla... He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand, bare skin on bare skin. His thumb traced circles on her palm. There's something else you need to understand. This arrangement makes you valuable, extremely valuable, and in my world, valuable things become targets. You think someone will come after me? I know they will. I have enemies who'd kill to discover my weaknesses, and you... His grip tightened. You're the biggest weakness I've had in 15 years. Then why risk it? Min Jae's eyes met hers, and what she saw there stole her breath. Hunger, hope, and something that looked dangerously close to desperation. Because I'm tired of living in hell, and you're the first thing that's felt like heaven since the day my brother destroyed me. The meeting in Min Jae's office was exactly as uncomfortable as Shayla had anticipated. Mrs. Lim stood beside the massive mahogany desk, her posture rigid, her expression broadcasting profound disapproval. Min-jae sat behind the desk, back in his armor, tailored black suit, gloves firmly in place, every inch the untouchable crime lord. Only Shayla noticed the way his eyes tracked her movement across the room, the way his shoulders eased slightly when she sat in the chair across from him. Miss Brooks will be assuming the role of personal attendant effective immediately, Min-jae said without preamble. She'll have clearance to all areas of the compound except the vault and the armory. She'll accompany me to all meetings, meals, and appointments. Her quarters will be moved to the second floor, closer to my private wing. Mrs. Lim's jaw tightened. Sir, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Miss Brooks has only been here 2 weeks. She hasn't been vetted for this level of access, hasn't been trained. Then train her. Min-jae's voice was ice. You have 48 hours to get her up to speed. After that, she's with me at all times. Mr. Kang, I must advise against this decision. The security risks alone are my concern, not yours. He leaned forward, and even Shayla felt the temperature drop. I've made my decision, Mrs. Lim. You can either support it or tender your resignation. Choose quickly. The house manager's face went carefully blank. Of course, sir. I'll begin Miss Brooks's training immediately. Good. Dismissed. Mrs. Lim left with her spine so straight it looked painful, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. Shayla waited until the footsteps faded. You just made an enemy. Mrs. Lim has been with my family for 30 years. She'll adapt. Min-jae pulled off his gloves, flexing his fingers. Besides, her disapproval is the least of our concerns. What are our concerns? My brother, for one. Kang Dae-jung lives in Seoul now, but he has people here, eyes everywhere. The moment he finds out about you, and he will find out, he'll try to use you against me. Shayla thought about what Min-jae had told her last night, about the white room and the torture, and the brother who'd destroyed him. Why did he do it? Turn you into this? Min-jae was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. My father was building an empire, and there could only be one heir. Dae-jung couldn't beat me fairly. I was smarter, more ruthless, better with people. So he broke me in a way that would make me unable to lead, unable to touch, to connect, to inspire loyalty through anything but fear. His hands curled into fists. He didn't count on me adapting, becoming something more dangerous than what I was before. And now? Now he's in Seoul, running a smaller operation, always watching, always waiting for me to show weakness. Min-jae's eyes found hers. If he discovers you can touch me, that you quiet the noise, he'll either try to kill you or kidnap you. Either way, you become a weapon he can use against me. So what do? We're careful. We keep this between us and only the most trusted people. And he stood, moving around the desk. We learn everything we can about why this works, because if we understand it, maybe we can protect it. He stopped directly in front of her chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Slowly, giving her time to refuse, he reached down and cupped her face with both hands. The relief that washed over his features was visceral, devastating. This is dangerous, Shayla whispered. I know. I could lose everything. I know that too. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. But I'm asking anyway. Stay with me. Be my silence. Help me remember what it feels like to be human. Shayla reached up, covering his hands with hers. Okay? Okay? I'll stay. I'll be whatever you need. She smiled slightly. But Min-jae, if your brother comes for me, he's going to find out I'm a lot harder to break than I look. For the first time since she'd met him, Kang Min-jae smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, lighter, almost happy. I believe you, he said. Outside the office, Mrs. Lim stood in the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. Yes, I'm certain. The girl can touch him. I saw it myself. No, I don't know how. Yes, sir, I'll keep watching. She ended the call and stood perfectly still, her face carefully neutral. In Seoul, Kang Dae-jung set down his phone and smiled. Finally, after 15 years, his brother had given him the perfect weapon. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Shayla learned the rhythms of Min-jae's world with the same focus she'd once applied to surviving Memphis. She learned which meetings required her to sit in the corner, projecting calm presence, and which required her to stand behind his chair, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder to keep the ghost pain at bay. She learned that he took his coffee black at 6 a.m., that he worked until 2 a.m. most nights, that he had nightmares about white rooms and screaming. She learned the geography of his body, which touches soothed him most, where to place her hands during the small seizures that still came sometimes when the sensory input got too intense. Temple touches for headaches, palm pressure over his heart for anxiety. Her fingers threaded through his hair when the memories got too loud. And Min Jae learned her too, learned that she checked her phone obsessively for messages from Imani, that she had a scar on her left shoulder from a childhood accident she'd only discovered when she saw the blood, that she hummed old gospel songs under her breath when she thought no one was listening. They didn't talk about what was happening between them, didn't name the way his eyes tracked her across every room, or the way her heart jumped when his bare fingers found her wrist, didn't acknowledge that this had stopped being professional the moment she'd stayed all night with her hand over his heart. But everyone else noticed. Mrs. Lim's disapproval had calcified into cold hostility. The other staff gave Shayla wide berth, like proximity to Min Jae's favor was contagious and dangerous. And the men who came for meetings, sharp-suited lieutenants with calculating eyes, looked at her like they were trying to determine her value, her weaknesses, her price. Rosa cornered her in the staff kitchen on a Tuesday morning, her voice urgent and low. "You need to be careful. People are talking." "Let them talk," Shayla said, pouring coffee. "You don't understand. Mr. Kang's world, it's not just business, it's blood. And you're walking around like you're untouchable because he needs you, but that just makes you a target." Rosa glanced at the doorway nervously. "Mrs. Lim has been making calls, late-night calls, in Korean. I don't speak it, but I know what scheming sounds like in any language." Shayla's instincts prickled. "You think she's reporting to someone?" "I think she's been here 30 years and you've been here 3 weeks, and suddenly you're more important than she is. People don't like being replaced." Rosa touched Shayla's arm. "Just watch your back, okay?" That afternoon, Min Jae had a video conference with his father in Seoul. Shayla sat in her usual corner of his office, reading a book, her presence anchoring him. She couldn't understand Korean, but she could read body language. The old man on the screen was angry, gesturing sharply, his face flushed. Min Jae's responses were calm, controlled, but she felt the tension, coiling in his shoulders. When the call ended, he sat motionless for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. "Bad news?" Shayla asked quietly. "My father wants me to come to Seoul, handle some territory disputes in person." Min Jae turned to face her, and she saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. "Daejung has been spreading rumors that I'm unfit to lead, that I've become compromised. Because of me. Because of you," he agreed. "My father wants to see for himself if the rumors are true." Shayla closed her book. "Are they? Am I compromising you?" Min Jae stood, crossing to where she sat, and pulled her to her feet. His hands framed her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You're the only thing keeping me functional. Without you, I'd be back in hell, barely able to stand being in the same room as another person." His voice dropped. "So yes, you've compromised me. You've made me need something I can't control, and in my world, need is the most dangerous thing you can feel. Then what do? We go to Seoul, together. And we show my father and my brother that I'm stronger than I've ever been." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Can you do that? Can you walk into the snake pit with me?" Shayla thought about Memphis, about the drive-bys and the dealers on corners, and the 1,000 small dangers she'd navigated growing up. She'd survived worse than rich men in suits. "I can do that," she said. He kissed her then, the first time their lips had met. It was soft, questioning, like he was asking permission for something he'd been wanting for weeks. Shayla answered by rising on her toes, her fingers sliding into his hair, pulling him closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Min Jae's eyes were dark, with something that looked like hunger and hope tangled together. "After Seoul," he said, his voice rough, "we need to talk about what this is between us." "After Seoul," Shayla agreed, but Seoul was 4 days away. They didn't have 4 days. The morning Shayla was poisoned started like any other. She woke at 5:30, showered, dressed in the elegant black clothes Min-jae had bought her, silk blouses and tailored pants that made her feel like someone important. She stopped by the staff kitchen for coffee, exchanged minimal pleasantries with the chef, and headed to Min-jae's office to start their morning routine. He was already at his desk, reading something on his tablet, a glass of water sitting untouched beside him. "Morning," Shayla said, setting down her own coffee. "You sleep at all?" "Some." He glanced up and warmth flickered in his eyes. "Better when you're near." She'd started spending nights in the room adjacent to his, officially for emergency response purposes, actually because neither of them could sleep well apart anymore. It was getting harder to pretend this was just a professional arrangement. "Drink your water," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "You get dehydrated when you work all night." Min-jae reached for the glass absently, bringing it to his lips. Shayla noticed it half a second too late. The way the water caught the light wrong, slightly thicker than it should be, a faint opalescent sheen on the surface. "Wait." But he'd already swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Min-jae set down the glass, frowning slightly. "Tastes off." Then his face went gray. He stood abruptly, knocking the chair backward, one hand clutching his chest. "Shayla!" His legs gave out. He collapsed, convulsing, blood flooding his mouth. His eyes went wide with shock and pain and recognition. Poison. Shayla was moving before conscious thought, dropping beside him, rolling him onto his side so he wouldn't choke. Her hands found his face, his neck, checking his pulse, racing, erratic, weakening. "Stay with me," she said, her voice sharp with command. "Min-jae, look at me." His eyes found hers. Confusion, terror, and underneath it, betrayal. Because the water had been sitting on his desk in his private office, which meant someone close had done this. Shayla grabbed her phone, hitting Mrs. Lim's number. "Get the doctor here now. Mr. Kang's been poisoned. Move." She dropped the phone and focused on Min-jae. His breathing was shallow, rapid. His skin was cold and clammy. Whatever was in that water was working fast, too fast for a normal poison. This was something designed specifically to kill someone with his condition, to overload his already hypersensitive nervous system. "I've got you," Shayla whispered, pressing her palms to his temples, trying to give him the silence he needed to fight. "You're going to be okay." But she could feel him slipping, his pulse threading beneath her fingers. The door burst open. Mrs. Lim entered with 2 guards and the compound's physician, Dr. Park. They all froze when they saw Shayla cradling Min-jae's head, her hands on his bare skin. "Help him," Shayla snapped. Dr. Park dropped beside them, already pulling out equipment. "What did he ingest?" "The water, that glass." Shayla pointed without removing her hands from Min-jae's face. One of the guards carefully picked up the glass with a cloth, sniffing it. His face went hard. Tetrodotoxin derivative, fast-acting neurotoxin. Mrs. Lim's expression was carefully blank, but Shayla caught something in her eyes, something that looked almost like satisfaction before she masked it. She knew. "Get out," Shayla said, her voice deadly quiet. "Miss Brooks, I hardly think—" "Get out!" The words came out as a roar, and Mrs. Lim actually flinched. "Everyone except Dr. Park, out now!" The guards retreated. Mrs. Lim lingered for a moment, then followed, closing the door softly behind her. Dr. Park worked quickly, injecting something into Min-jae's arm, checking vitals, barking medical terms Shayla didn't understand, but she kept her hands on Min-jae's face, kept the connection, and slowly, impossibly slowly, his breathing began to stabilize. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, Dr. Park sat back. "He'll live," but it was close. Another few minutes. He looked at Shayla with something like awe. "You kept him grounded. Your touch, it counteracted the neurological cascade." Shayla barely heard him. She was focused on Min-jae's eyes, watching consciousness slowly return. "Shayla," he whispered, his voice destroyed. "I'm here." "Who?" "I don't know yet, but I will." She touched his face gently. "Rest now. We'll figure it out." But even as she said it, she knew. It was in the way Mrs. Lim had looked. The timing, the access required. Someone inside the compound had tried to kill Min-jae, and they'd be coming for Shayla next. By evening, Min Jae was conscious but weak, confined to his bed with IV lines snaking from his arms. Shayla hadn't left his side, even when Mrs. Lim tried to insist she needed rest. "Find who did this," Min Jae had ordered his head of security, a granite-faced man named Chen. "Search every room. Check every person. I want answers by morning." But Shayla already knew they wouldn't find anything conclusive. Whoever had done this was smart, careful. They'd left no obvious trail. At midnight, Chen returned with a small evidence bag. Inside was a glass vial, empty but with residue. "We found this in the staff quarters," Chen said, his voice flat, "hidden in the back of a dresser drawer." Shayla's blood went cold. "Whose quarters?" Chen's eyes met hers with something like pity. "Yours, Miss Brooks." The room went silent. Min Jae sat up slowly, ignoring Dr. Park's protests. His face was emotionless, but Shayla could see the war happening behind his eyes. Logic against feeling, evidence against trust. "That's not mine," Shayla said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Someone planted it. Your room, your access." Mrs. Lim appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "You bring Mr. Kang his water every morning. You have keys to every room, and now we find the poison vial in your possession." "I didn't do this." "Then how do you explain it?" Mrs. Lim's voice was almost gentle, which made it worse, like she was trying to help Shayla understand her own guilt. Shayla looked at Min Jae, willing him to see the truth. "You know me. You know I would never." "I knew her too," Min Jae said quietly. His voice was empty, dead. "The woman my brother sent 15 years ago, Sora. She smiled at me the same way you do, touched me the same way, made me believe—" He stopped, his jaw working. "And then she led me to hell. I'm not her. Prove it." Shayla's heart shattered, because there was no proof, just her word against physical evidence, and Min Jae had learned the hard way that words were the cheapest form of currency. "I can't prove it," she whispered. "I can only tell you the truth. I didn't do this. I would never hurt you. She stopped before saying the words that would make this infinitely worse. Min Jae stood, swaying slightly. When he spoke, his voice was the voice of the viper, cold, controlled, merciless. "Take her to the holding room, lock the door, post guards. No one sees her, no one speaks to her until I decide what to do. Min Jae, please, take her, now." Chen moved forward and Shayla didn't resist. What would be the point? She could fight, but where would she run? She was 3,000 miles from home, in a compound full of armed men, accused of trying to murder the one person she'd started to. She couldn't finish that thought. As they led her from the room, Shayla looked back once. Min Jae stood at the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. He didn't turn around. The holding room was in the basement. Concrete walls, no windows, a cot and a bucket and nothing else. They locked the door with a sound like a gunshot, and Shayla was alone. She sat on the cot, her hands shaking, her mind racing. Someone had framed her, someone who had access to her room, to Min Jae's office, who knew exactly how to make it look like she'd betrayed him. Someone who wanted to destroy the one thing that gave Min Jae peace. In Seoul, Kang Dae-jung smiled at his phone, reading Mrs. Lim's latest message. The anchor is cut. He thinks she poisoned him. It's only a matter of time now. He'd waited 15 years for his brother to show weakness. It had been worth the wait. The first day, Shayla paced, 12 feet by 8 feet, concrete floor that hurt her knees when she tested it for weaknesses, which she couldn't feel but could see in the scraped skin. Walls that swallowed sound. A single bulb that flickered like it was trying to decide whether to give up entirely. She counted steps, measured time by the meals they slid through a slot in the door. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, each one delivered by silent guards who wouldn't meet her eyes. She did push-ups until her arms shook, squats until her legs trembled, anything to burn off the rage building in her chest like pressure in a boiler. Someone had framed her, set her up so perfectly that even Min Jae, who'd touched her, needed her, started to trust her, believed she'd poisoned him. And the worst part was she understood why. She'd lived through enough betrayal in Memphis to know that evidence beat words every time. That trust was a luxury people like Min Jae couldn't afford. but understanding didn't make it hurt less. The second day, the anger crystallized into focus. Shayla stopped pacing and started thinking, replaying every interaction since she'd arrived. Mrs. Lim's hostility, the late-night phone calls Rosa had mentioned, the way the house manager had looked at the evidence bag, not surprised, satisfied. Mrs. Lim. It had to be. She had access to everything. Shayla's room, Min Jae's office, the staff schedules. She'd been with the family for 30 years, which meant she was beyond suspicion. Perfect cover for a traitor. But why? What did Mrs. Lim gain from destroying Min Jae's one source of peace, unless she wasn't working for herself? Shayla thought about what Min Jae had told her about his brother, about Dae-jung living in Seoul, watching, waiting for weakness, about how need was the most dangerous thing you could feel in their world. Dae-jung knew about her, had to, and he'd activated whatever sleeper agent he'd had in place all these years. Shayla pressed her palms against the cold concrete, thinking, if she was right, then Mrs. Lim was reporting to Dae-jung, which meant the brother knew Min Jae was vulnerable right now, poisoned, weakened, without his anchor. This wasn't just about removing Shayla. This was about destroying Min Jae entirely. She had to get out, had to warn him. But the door was solid steel, the guards were armed, and she was locked in a concrete box with no tools, no leverage, no way out. Shayla closed her eyes and thought about Imani, about Memphis, about every impossible situation she'd ever navigated by being smarter than people expected. She'd survived this long by being underestimated. Time to use it. The third day, Shayla stopped eating. When breakfast came through the slot, she left it untouched. Same with lunch. By dinner, she was sitting in the corner, her back against the wall, her breathing deliberately shallow. The guard who delivered dinner, a younger guy, maybe 25, actually looked at her this time. "You need to eat." Shayla didn't respond, just stared at nothing with unfocused eyes. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Nothing. She heard him mutter something in Korean, heard his footsteps retreat, heard urgent conversation in the hallway, words she didn't understand but could interpret. She's not responding. Something's wrong. Should we get Dr. Park? 20 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Park entered with 2 guards, his medical bag in hand. He knelt beside Shayla, checking her pulse, shining a light in her eyes. "Miss Brooks, can you hear me?" Shayla let her head loll to the side, her breathing ragged. She'd seen enough of Imani's medical emergencies to fake distress convincingly. Dr. Park's face creased with concern. "Her pulse is weak. She might be going into shock. I need to examine her properly, but not here. We need to move her to the medical wing." "Mr. Kang said she doesn't leave this room," one guard said. "Mr. Kang also doesn't want a dead prisoner on his hands. If she dies in custody, that creates legal problems even his lawyers can't fix." Dr. Park stood. "I'm moving her. You can explain to Mr. Kang why you let a detainee die of medical neglect." The guards exchanged looks. Finally, the older one nodded. "Fine, but we stay with her the entire time." They lifted Shayla between them, carrying her down the hallway. She kept her body limp, her eyes half closed, cataloging everything. Left turn, right turn, stairs up, another hallway. The compound's layout unfolded in her mind like a map. The medical wing was on the first floor, east side. They laid her on an examination table, and Dr. Park began checking vitals while the guards stood by the door. Shayla waited, patient, breathing shallow. Dr. Park leaned close, ostensibly checking her pupils, and whispered so quietly she almost missed it. "I know you're faking. Don't react." Shayla's heart jumped, but she kept her face slack. "I don't know if you're guilty," he continued in that barely there whisper, "but I know Mrs. Lim is lying. I saw her near your quarters the night before the poisoning. She doesn't think anyone noticed." He straightened, speaking normally now. "Pulse is stabilizing. Might have been a panic attack. I'll give her a sedative and monitor her for a few hours." He prepared a syringe, but when he injected it into her arm, Shayla felt nothing. Because there was nothing. He'd injected saline. "She'll sleep now," Dr. Park told the guards. "I'll watch her. You can wait outside." "Our orders were to stay with her." "Fine, but stay by the door. I need space to work." The guards moved to the doorway, far enough that Dr. Park could lean close again. "When I create a distraction, You run, he whispered. Chen's office is 2 doors down, left side. He's been investigating independently. He suspects Mrs. Lim, too. If you can reach him... Why are you helping me? Shayla breathed. Because I've watched Mr. Kang suffer for 15 years, and you're the first thing that's given him peace. Whatever else you are, you're not poison. Dr. Park straightened, checking monitors. Be ready. 5 minutes later, he knocked over a tray of instruments. The clatter was explosive in the quiet room, and both guards stepped forward instinctively. Damn it! Help me before these roll under the cabinets, Dr. Park snapped. The moment both guards bent down, Shayla rolled off the table and ran. She made it 3 steps before one guard shouted, 4 steps before she heard them coming after her. But she was fast, always had been, and fear added wings. Left turn. Chen's office should be there. She slammed through the door and locked it behind her just as fists started pounding. Chen looked up from his desk, his hand going to his weapon, then freezing when he saw her face. Miss Brooks. Mrs. Lim is working for Daejung, Shayla said, her words tumbling out fast. She planted the poison vial. Dr. Park saw her near my room. She's been reporting to Seoul. Rosa heard her making calls. This whole thing is a setup to isolate Min-jae, weaken him, make him vulnerable for an attack. Chen's face went hard. He pulled up something on his computer, turning the monitor toward her. I've been tracking communications. Mrs. Lim's been using an encrypted phone. I cracked it this morning. The screen showed message logs, all in Korean, but Chen translated, his voice grim. The anchor is cut. He's isolated now. Move up the timeline. Chen looked at Shayla. There's a team coming from Seoul. They land in 6 hours. Daejung is coming personally to remove his brother and take control of the syndicate. The pounding on the door intensified. We need to tell Min-jae, Shayla said. He won't listen. He thinks you tried to kill him. Chen stood, grabbing his phone. But he'll listen to evidence, and I have enough to prove Mrs. Lim is the traitor. Then let's... The door exploded inward, guards flooding through. But Chen already had his weapon drawn, his face hard. Stand down, he barked. I'm head of security, and I'm taking Miss Brooks into protective custody pending new evidence in the poisoning investigation. Our orders came from Mr. Kang directly, the senior guard said, and I'm about to give Mr. Kang information that will change those orders. Chen grabbed Shayla's arm. Come on! They moved through the compound like a small war party. Chen, Shayla, and 2 of Chen's personal team who'd been called in. Staff scattered out of their way. Mrs. Lim appeared in a hallway, her face going pale when she saw Shayla free. Stop them! Mrs. Lim shouted. She's escaping! You're done, Chen said coldly and kept moving. They reached Min-jae's quarters. Chen knocked once, then entered without waiting. Min-jae was at his desk, looking worse than Shayla had ever seen him. Gray skin, dark circles, his hands shaking even in their gloves. Without her nearby, the ghost pain was eating him alive. When he saw Shayla, something complicated crossed his face. Anger, relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. What is this? His voice was raw. Sir, new evidence. Chen pulled out his phone, pulling up the message logs. Mrs. Lim has been communicating with your brother. She planted the poison vial. She poisoned you and framed Miss Brooks to isolate you. Min-jae stared at the screen, his jaw working. How long? At least 3 months, probably longer. And sir, Chen's voice went harder. Daejung is coming. He's landing in 4 hours with a kill team. This was never about just removing Miss Brooks. This was about removing you. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then Min-jae's eyes found Shayla's. You knew. I figured it out. 3 days alone gives you time to think. And you didn't do it. Didn't poison me. No. Her voice was steady. I told you the truth. You didn't believe me. Something crumbled in his expression. Shayla, we don't have time, Chen interrupted. If Daejung is coming, we need to prepare. Lockdown protocols, defensive positions. No. Min-jae stood, and despite his weakened state, he was suddenly the Viper again. Cold, controlled, lethal. No more defense, no more waiting. He looked at Shayla. I need you. For what? To end this. My brother thinks I'm weak without you. Let's show him exactly how wrong he is. Min-jae pulled off his gloves. Will you stand with me? After everything I've done, After I doubted you, will you still be my silence? Shayla thought about 3 days in darkness, about betrayal, about the look in his eyes when he'd ordered her locked away. But she also thought about the storm, about his hands on her face, about the way he'd whispered, "You feel like silence," like it was the most sacred thing in the world. She crossed the room and took his bare hands in hers. The relief that washed over Min Jae was visceral. His eyes closed, his breathing eased, and for the first time in 3 days, he looked like he could stand without falling. "I'll stand with you," Shayla said. "But Min Jae, when this is over, we're having a very long conversation about trust." He opened his eyes, and they were dark with regret and determination. "When this is over, I'll spend the rest of my life earning yours back." "Good answer." She squeezed his hands. "Now let's go deal with your brother." Chen cleared his throat. "Sir, what about Mrs. Lim?" Min Jae's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "Find her, lock her in the holding room, let her see what 3 days in darkness feels like." He turned to Shayla. "And then we get ready for war." 4 hours until Dae-jung arrived. 4 hours to prepare for the fight that would end 15 years of suffering. 4 hours to prove that the anchor wasn't cut. It was steel, and it would hold. Kang Dae-jung arrived like a storm, dressed in expensive suits. 3 black SUVs rolled through the compound gates at exactly 11 p.m., their occupants moving with military precision. 12 men total, all armed, all loyal to the brother who'd spent 15 years waiting for this moment. Shayla watched from the second-floor window, Min Jae beside her, their hands clasped. She could feel the tension in his grip, the old trauma rising like bile. "Last chance to hide," Min Jae said quietly. "He'll try to take you, use you against me." "Let him try." Shayla turned to face him. "I grew up in South Memphis. I've dealt with scarier men than your brother." "He's not just scary. He's smart, calculating. He'll find your weakness and exploit it." "Then it's good I don't have many weaknesses." She touched his face gently. "And the one I do have is standing right here, which means I'm not going anywhere." Min Jae pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "When this is over..." "When this is over, we're both walking out of here alive. Together." She kissed him once, soft and quick. "Now let's go show your brother what a mistake looks like." They descended the main staircase side by side. Chen and his security team were positioned strategically throughout the first floor, visible enough to be a deterrent, armed enough to be a threat. The house staff had been sent to their quarters under guard. Mrs. Lim was locked in the basement, screaming threats that no one could hear through soundproof walls. The front doors opened. Dae-jung entered first, and Shayla understood immediately why Min Jae feared him. He looked like his younger brother. Same sharp features, same elegant build, but where Min Jae had learned to channel his darkness into control, Dae-jung wore his light cologne. His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright, the kind of man who enjoyed breaking things just to watch them shatter. "Little brother?" Dae-jung's voice was warm, affectionate, utterly false. "You look terrible. Perhaps you should be resting." "I'm fine." Min Jae descended the last step, Shayla still at his side. "More than fine, actually, which must be disappointing for you." Dae-jung's eyes landed on Shayla, and she felt his attention like a physical weight, invasive and calculating. "And this must be the famous American, the one who can touch you without consequences. I've heard so much." "From Mrs. Lim?" Shayla asked. "She's indisposed at the moment. Something about betraying her employer and committing attempted murder. You know how it is." The smile never left Dae-jung's face, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't." Min Jae's voice was ice. "Just like you didn't know about the tetrodotoxin, or the planted evidence, or the communication logs Chen recovered showing Mrs. Lim reporting to you for the past 3 months. "Circumstantial," Dae-jung said smoothly, "and hardly enough to accuse me of anything actionable." "I don't need court-admissible evidence, brother. I just need the truth." Min Jae took a step forward. "You tried to kill me. Again, just like you did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I made you stronger. You should be thanking me." The casual admission hung in the air like poison gas. Min Jae's hand tightened on Shayla's, his only tell that the words had landed. You destroyed me. I refined you, made you into something feared, something powerful. Daejung spread his hands. Yes, I had Dr. Huang rewire your nervous system. Yes, I made sure you'd never be able to touch another human without agony. But look what you became. The Viper. Untouchable. A legend. You should be grateful. Grateful? Min Jae's voice was dead calm, which Shayla knew meant he was seconds from violence. You tortured me for 4 days, left me broken and alone, made it so every human connection felt like dying. And you want gratitude? I want recognition that I made you what you are. Daejung's smile sharpened. But then she came along. This little housekeeper who somehow doesn't trigger your condition. And suddenly you're soft again. Weak. Vulnerable. He pulled a gun from his jacket. Smooth, casual, like he was pulling out a phone. Chen's team raised their weapons immediately, but Daejung just laughed. Please, we're family. I'm not going to shoot my baby brother. He aimed the gun at Shayla instead. I'm going to shoot his weakness. Min Jae moved a step in front of her, but Shayla was faster. She'd spent 3 days in darkness thinking about this exact moment, gaming out scenarios, preparing. You think I'm his weakness? She said, her voice steady. That's your whole plan? Kill me and he falls apart? It's worked before. Sora was very effective until she'd served her purpose. I'm not Sora. Shayla released Min Jae's hand and walked forward directly toward the gun. And you've made a fundamental miscalculation. Daejung's eyes narrowed. Stay back. Or what? You'll shoot me? Shayla kept walking. 2 steps. 3. Go ahead, pull the trigger. Shayla. Min Jae's voice was sharp with fear, but she didn't stop. 4 steps. 5. Until the gun was pressed directly against her chest, cold metal over her heart. You think shooting me will break him, Shayla said quietly, looking Daejung directly in the eyes. But here's what you don't understand about men like Min Jae. Trauma doesn't make them weak. It makes them survivors. And survivors don't break when they lose something. They get dangerous. Touching speech. Any last words? Yeah, I have PSA, congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis. I can't feel pain. Never could. She smiled. Which means when you shoot me, I'm not going down easy. I'm going to keep coming. And while you're trying to figure out why I'm not screaming, Chen's men are going to put 3 bullets in your skull. Daejung's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Shayla grabbed his wrist, the one holding the gun, and twisted. Hard. Her mechanics were perfect, learned from too many nights in Memphis dodging men with weapons. The gun clattered to the floor. And then everything happened at once. Daejung's men drew their weapons. Chen's team responded. The foyer erupted into a standoff. 12 guns on one side, 8 on the other. Everyone screaming. No one shooting because the brothers were too close to the crossfire. Shayla had Daejung's arm twisted behind his back, her knee pressed into his spine, her voice calm in his ear. Here's how this ends. You leave. You go back to Seoul. You never come near Min Jae again. And in exchange, I don't break your arm and let Chen's men turn you into Swiss cheese. He's my brother. This is family business. Family doesn't torture family. Family doesn't spend 15 years destroying someone just to steal their power. Shayla twisted harder, and even she could see the unnatural angle of his shoulder. You're not family. You're a predator who got outplayed. Min Jae appeared beside them, his face cold and beautiful and merciless. He knelt down so he was eye level with his brother. You were right about one thing, Min Jae said quietly. You did make me stronger, but not because of the torture, because I survived it. I survived you. I built an empire while broken, and now that I'm healing... He glanced at Shayla. I'm unstoppable. He stood, addressing Daejung's men. You have a choice. Leave now with your boss and live, or stay and die protecting a man who sees you as disposable. Choose quickly. One by one, the guns lowered. Daejung's team wasn't stupid. They'd been hired for muscle, not suicide missions. When their employer was on his knees with a woman's knee in his spine and a dozen guns pointed at his head, loyalty had its limits. Smart choice, Chen said. Now get out, all of you, and tell your networks that Kang Min-jae is done playing defense. Anyone who comes for him answers to me. Shayla released Dae-jung, stepping back. The older brother stood slowly, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." Min-jae's voice carried absolute finality. "You're going back to Seoul. You're going to tell Father exactly what you did, both 15 years ago and today, and you're going to resign from the syndicate entirely. Because if you don't—" He stepped closer. "I will tell every organization you work with exactly how you destroyed your own brother for power. I'll show them the medical records, the communications, the evidence of your betrayal. And they'll know you're not just ruthless, you're disloyal to blood. In our world, that's a death sentence." Dae-jung stared at his brother, something like understanding finally dawning. "You'd destroy me. In a heartbeat. The only reason you're walking out of here alive is because you're right. We're family. And unlike you, I remember what that means." Min-jae's expression hardened. "But test me again, and family won't save you." Silence filled the foyer. Finally, Dae-jung nodded once, sharp and bitter. He gestured to his men, and they retreated toward the doors. At the threshold, he turned back. "She won't always be there to protect you." "He doesn't need protection." Shayla's voice was quiet but carried. "He needs partnership, equals, something you'll never understand because you see everyone as either prey or threat. That's why you'll always lose to him." Dae-jung left without another word. The SUVs rolled away into the night, taking 15 years of torture and manipulation with them. When the doors closed, the compound exhaled collectively. Min-jae turned to Shayla, and the mask finally cracked. He pulled her into his arms, his whole body shaking, his face buried in her neck. "You walked into a gun," he said, his voice muffled and raw. "You walked into a gun like it was nothing." "It was something, but not as important as you." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "I locked you in a basement for 3 days. I believed evidence over you. I failed you." "You did," Shayla agreed, "and we're going to talk about that. Long conversations about trust and trauma and how we move forward." She touched his face gently. "But right now, I'm just glad you're alive and your bastard brother is gone." Min-jae kissed her, desperate and grateful and searching. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it before, should have trusted it. But I love you, Shayla Brooks. You're not just my silence, you're my future." Tears burned Shayla's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself since this nightmare began. "I love you too, even when you're an idiot." He laughed, the sound broken but genuine. "Especially when I'm an idiot. Especially then." Chen cleared his throat diplomatically. "Sir, there's still the matter of Mrs. Lim, and the syndicate will have questions about tonight." "Mrs. Lim gets prosecuted. Full extent of the law plus exile from any organization that values loyalty." Min-jae straightened, becoming the Viper again, but different now, stronger. "And the syndicate will understand that I'm no longer vulnerable. I have my anchor. Anyone who thinks that makes me weak is welcome to test the theory." He took Shayla's hand, bare skin on bare skin, in front of everyone. "As for questions about her," he looked at Shayla, "there won't be any, because Shayla isn't just my personal attendant anymore. She's my partner, my equal, and eventually, if she'll have me, my wife." Shayla's breath caught. "Min-jae." "Too soon?" He smiled, and it was real, unguarded, beautiful. "I just survived my second assassination attempt because of you. I'm not wasting time on slow anymore." "It's definitely too soon." Shayla kissed him anyway. "Ask me again in 6 months." "I will. Every day for 6 months until you say yes. Deal." 3 months later, Shayla stood in the compound's eastern window at sunrise, watching fog roll through the mountains. Behind her, Min-jae slept peacefully. No nightmares, no ghost pain, just rest. Her phone buzzed, a text from Imani. "Mom's lab results came back clean. Doctors say full recovery. How's living with the scary rich guy?" Shayla smiled, typing back, "Scary rich guy just asked me to marry him again. That's day 87. Girl." "What did you say?" I said, ask me again in 93 days. You're insane, but also I love you. Come home for Christmas, we'll both come. He wants to meet you. She set down the phone and returned to bed, sliding under the covers. Min Jae's arm automatically wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, even in sleep. Bad dreams? He murmured, half awake. No dreams, just thinking. About how I came here for money and found something worth infinitely more. She turned to face him. About perfect opposites and how they balance. Min Jae opened his eyes, dark and warm in the early light. You feel too much, I feel nothing. Together we're whole. Exactly. Shayla kissed him softly. So ask me again. Ask you what? You know what. His smile was slow, devastating. Shayla Brooks, will you marry me? Yes. The word hung in the air between them, simple, certain, irrevocable. Yes? Min Jae's voice cracked slightly. Really? Really, but I have conditions. Name them. Imani and Mom move into the guest house. I'm not leaving them behind. Done. I want to finish my degree. Online is fine, but I'm finishing. Already arranged. Enrolled you last week in case you said yes. Shayla laughed. Confident, weren't you? Hopeful. There's a difference. He pulled her closer, his hands framing her face. Anything else? Yeah, no more basements. No more assuming the worst. We talk, we trust, we work through things together. Deal? Deal. Min Jae kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. You've given me back my humanity, Shayla. The ability to touch, to connect, to feel something other than pain. I'm never letting that go, never letting you go. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. They lay tangled together as sunlight filled the room, two broken people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something unbreakable from the pieces, the viper and his silence, pain and numbness, perfect opposites, perfectly balanced, forever.